I thought of wrestling as being in a square with like ropes and stuff.
What would kind of be your elevator pitch to an athlete who hasn't done wrestling before?
It's the only martial sport that we have in high school. You'll see a bunch of them come off the mat and cry.
Like there's no, oh, here's your trophy.
So here's the great thing about wrestling, 1 versus 1. You can't always control who's the winner.
I guess your whole team eventually was a blank canvas.
You know, if you build it, they will come. We were starting ground speed 0 with a brand new sport. We hit a home run with it from day 1.
Would you say you want your athletes to be more like a La Liga? I can't do this anymore, it's too hard. Yeah.
The ultimate goal in Raccoon River Wrestling is to
Well, I guess welcome to the show. Can you kind of just introduce yourself to everyone around?
Sure. My name is James Biscoglia. I am the head girls wrestling coach here at Northwest.
Mm-hmm. And can you kind of just give us a little explainer about the team and everything that's involved with that? Because it's not technically just Northwest.
No, it's not. And we're actually called Raccoon River Wrestling. That was a decision that was made by the districts. It is a true co-op in that while it's hosted by and operated through the administration here at Northwest. We actually do home meets at Van Meter. We do home meets at Adel. The 4 schools are Waukee and Waukee Northwest, and then also Van Meter and ADM.
Yeah. So kind of going into how you got your start, like how did you originally get into wrestling? I know that like at least some of your kids have gone into wrestling, you kind of like pass that on, but how did you start?
So in 8th grade in high school, my best friend went out for wrestling. His name was Derek Parker, and I hadn't even really thought of it. In fact, I thought of wrestling as being in a square with like ropes and stuff.
Okay,
yeah. So I didn't even know very much about it, but within a year, I was kind of hooked on the sport, and I went ahead and wrestled a little bit in college. I only wrestled for a year at Drake University. And then I transitioned away from the sport for a little over a decade, kind of got into soccer big time, in fact.
Okay, love soccer, by the way.
And I was actually at a soccer practice, and one of the other dads was bringing his son to wrestling. And, of course, we live in Iowa.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, yeah, I used to do that years ago. And he encouraged me to bring my son, who was in 1st grade at the time, to a practice, which I did. And that was 2006. And by 2008, I was coaching at Waukee High School with Chad Volmicki.
Yeah. So, was there a point in time where you always wanted to know you wanted to coach? You said you wanted a soccer. Was there a point in time where someone who inspired you to like get into coaching, and then obviously eventually flipped over to wrestling? But
yeah, that's a great question. I think I inspired myself. So I went to Drake University for undergrad and law school, and then I practiced in Florida for 9 years.
Oh, whoa!
And so we moved down to Florida, and really, I was playing soccer at that point.
Okay.
Just kind of
like collegiately or just
adult league soccer.
Yeah.
And I was getting more and more involved in it, and I thought, wow, it'd be kind of interesting maybe to give back to that community. So in Florida, I started coaching soccer. I think it was a U12 team.
Okay. Yeah.
And I coached down there in the youth ranks for a couple of years, and then we decided when at that time my kids, Kyle and Kelly, were starting into schools that we wanted to move back to Iowa. And so when I got here, I called Chris McGill, who's the head coach currently at Vision Soccer Academy.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And so Chris hired me as one of the team coaches. And so I was actually pretty involved in coaching soccer, playing soccer, and refereeing. I was an NCAA referee at the time.
Yeah.
So, and that got me up through about 2006, like I said. And then I slowly got into the wrestling world again. And the more and more that my kids got engaged into wrestling, the more I kind of got involved and sucked into wrestling coaching, I guess you would say.
First of all, what position do you play in soccer? I used to play goalie. I don't play anymore.
Sure.
But what position do you play?
So I was kind of like a defense, like center defensive player.
Okay, so like a 6, kind of?
Yeah,
or?
like a 6. Back then we didn't have the numbers.
Yeah,
and
okay,
so,
yeah.
It was more like striker sweeper type position, stopper sweeper type position.
Yeah.
And sometimes left back, something along those lines.
Got some good speed then?
Huh?
Got some good speed then?
I was a lot faster when I weighed 150 pounds and was about 25 years younger,
Yeah. So I want to kind of dive into the whole wrestling life because you kind of switched into that. So what would kind of be your elevator pitch to an athlete who hasn't done wrestling before, or even like to your kid to like join wrestling?
Sure. And of course, in the role that I'm serving right now, I get to make that pitch all the time.
Yeah, I bet.
The thing that I have always loved about wrestling is that it's an individual and a team sport kind of combined.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely a team component to it. That's why we'll talk about one of the reasons why we formed RRW in a moment, kind of springboards off of that. But but there's an individual challenge to it, and then there's also some limitations as to who competes. I mean, you have two people that are theoretically about the same size.
Yeah.
And then when we're talking about like junior varsity matches, we not only try to match people up based on size, but also on skill level or experience level. So there's a lot of opportunity for self-development and recognizing, how self-development impacts how you perform in wrestling. And then, I like to say that there's not a lot of sports that really, there's life on the mat, but then it really kind of impacts your life off the mat. So those are the kind of things that I like to sell about the sport. It's also fun. It's challenging.
Very challenging.
It's when people come out, I think they're surprised to find that they like it, because there's a physical contact element to it, and they're not sure if they're going to like that or not. And the ones that tend to thrive in wrestling find out that maybe while they were hesitant to get involved in that they actually do like it.
Yeah.
So that's the other neat thing about the sport. It kind of introduces. It's like no other sport in high school.
Yeah.
It's the only martial sport that we have in high school.
I was about to say. I was about to ask, like, is there any main things that differentiate the sport? I mean, you kind of touch on them, but is like the main one just like one person versus another person? Because like, yes, in track you're running against someone, but like you're not actively reacting off of someone. And like, soccer, but it's like it's a team and it's not necessarily like one-on-one.
Yeah. The amazing thing, the best example I can give you about wrestling and how it's different. When you go into a youth tournament, I think there's one here at Northwest this weekend.
Yeah. If
you were to come in, boys, girls, doesn't matter, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, when they lose their match, you'll see a bunch of them come off the mat and cry.
Yeah. It's a huge deal.
It's a big deal because it's very personal. And whereas, you watch your weekend soccer tournament 3v3, a lot of those times the kids don't even know the score. They don't even know who won the game. The parents do, but maybe, but the kids don't.
Yeah.
So there is a very different. That's one of the first things I noticed about the sport when I was not involved in it, because I didn't wrestle as a youth, but when I got involved as a parent and saw my own kids and other kids and how they reacted, I realized there's something different about this. There's something much more personal about it.
Yeah.
And I think that because of that, those that are attracted to the challenge of pushing themselves to get better at something that is that personal to them, those are the ones that thrive in the wrestling world. And then, again, they take that off the mat and can apply some of the lessons that they're learning in that environment to their regular life.
So that's super fascinating to me, because like you'll look at a lot of younger sports and it's like, or like when I go to my younger sister's basketball game and they're not keeping score and they're traveling all over the place, right? Like obviously, it's fun, it's meant to be like that, but obviously wrestling, as you said, is like very much in the sense of like, you lost. Like there's no, here's your trophy. Okay, maybe you get a trophy after because you participated, but at the same time it's like, no, you lost to this person. Like I feel like a lot of different sports don't have that level of accountability.
Right.
And so like, can you speak to a little bit about how, just like even in the sense of like more modern times, I guess, where like a lot of people are moving towards participation and like, it's like obviously at a high school level it's completely different.
Right.
But at youth level, where it's at a point where, to some extent, it's. I think you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's that we can't have winners and losers. So here's the great thing about wrestling, at least the way I coach it at the high school level too. There's very few sports where you have, as we talked about, 1 versus 1.
Yeah,
somebody's going to walk off the winner. You can't always control who's the winner. Sometimes somebody's going to have a better skill set, or someone's going to have a little bit more athleticism.
Yeah, more speed or something.
More speed, whatever the case may be. You can't control that. And if you get too hung up, like one of the great things about wrestling is you can't get hung up on the winning and the losing.
Yeah.
You have to let the winning happen, and you have to figure out why you lost and try to make it positive impact come out of that. What a great life lesson that is. I mean, it's like, okay, winning, I can be humbled by my wins, and I can learn from my losses. And you're signing up for a sport where you're going to lose.
Yeah.
There's very, very few out there that can get through the sport without running into somebody that can beat you somewhere along the line.
Exactly.
So that's one of the really powerful things about the sport in terms of, and now let's talk about girls wrestling. That's one of the really powerful things that the boys have just enjoyed for years and years and years. And then a few girls would kind of dabble into it because they were courageous enough to do that. But overall, now we've opened up that same level of experience to this whole broad new spectrum, this whole new gender that's out there taking advantage of the same things that boys have been able to take advantage of for years. And basically, it's kind of like, a baseball field in Dyersville, Iowa. If you build it, they will come. And that's exactly what's happened. As soon as these states start sanctioning, the girls come, and they don't just come a little bit. We talked off camera, but it's doubling every year in terms of not just Iowa State participation, but national participation.
Yeah. I also kind of going into having this new team and everything like that. Can you kind of talk to how you initially got started at Waukee, and then obviously we're at Northwest, it was a completely different time, but how kind of Raccoon River Wrestling kind of came about and slowly got built, and it got to the point where it got sanctioned.
Sure.
And we got people in-house.
It was, I give a lot of credit to really the superintendents at particularly Van Meter and Waukee School District. I know they had at least one conversation about it. The athletic directors had, and again, we're talking about Eric Boyle over at Waukee, Jim Dewey, Rick Roberts, Rod Weber's over at ADM. The four of them came together. I became involved in that as it became apparent that I was interested in the position. And so we penciled out what that would look like and how we would be able to try to recruit from the different districts, because we were starting ground speed zero with a brand new sport. So it wasn't like, if you're picking up, a new golf program or a new soccer program, like there's all these developmental programs at the youth level.
Exactly.
So if you're combining schools and stuff like that, those that have been participating for years are going to simply say, I'm an ADM, but I've been doing this sport for years, and if we're going to do a co-op with Waukee, I'd be happy to go over there because it's the sport I've already enjoyed. We were in a whole different ballgame. We had to attract girls that had never wrestled before.
Or even been to a wrestling meet or even seen it.
Some of them had, many of them hadn't. Some of them were younger siblings, but many of them weren't. And so that's kind of where the impetus for coming up with the Raccoon River Wrestling. We wanted to give it a moniker and an identity. Not, we didn't want to go try to tell a whole bunch of Waukee girls or ADM girls, hey, you're going to wrestle for Northwest High School. We wanted to make it something that they could all buy into, knowing that it's obviously not going to be something that exists forever. The ultimate goal in Raccoon River Wrestling is to develop 4 distinct teams that, as they decide that it's the right time for their school to peel off of the co-op, that they're able to do so with sufficient numbers, sufficient facilities.
So kind of going initially into the first few like months, I guess. What were kind of like the main challenges trying to like put the team together? Was it just like getting people signed up, like just names on paper, or was it more trying to figure out
all of it?
Yeah.
We had no season, so we had no schedule. So we had to put together a schedule. One of the reasons that we really wanted to do this co-op was I think we started off by saying wrestling is an individual sport and it's a team sport.
Yeah.
If your team isn't big enough, it becomes just an individual sport. And what I mean by that is if you can't field a dual team and go out and have duels against other teams, then you're missing out on a very important team component. We've had 19 duels this year. We had 20 duels last year. 19 duels this year, and 20 duels last year. That was really important to me to make sure if I'm going to try to grow the sport, that I give the girls that are coming out for wrestling the same exact opportunities that the boys programs that I had coached for the last 15 years got. And that includes duels and traveling and
the whole thing.
The whole thing, right. I wanted to give them the whole package.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the biggest reasons that we had to import. We would have never had, even just from Northwest alone, we would have never had the numbers to be able to do that type of thing. It was collectively that we were able to offer year one a full season that included duels, that included tournaments, we did 2 overnights at the time.
Oh, whoa.
So it was important to me, if we're really going to give this thing a swing, that we hit a home run with it from day one. Because otherwise, if the girls come out and they're not getting the experience that they need, they won't come back, right?
Exactly.
And we needed them to come back. So that was the whole. I actually alluded that before. That was the whole reason that we formed Raccoon River Wrestling, was to give these schools an identity. I think one of the questions that you had asked about was about, is it like a club?
Yeah.
It's not. It's like a high school team. It's very much like a high school team. And for one weekend, or for the weekend during wrestling season and for the wrestling practices, it's almost like they go to Raccoon River High School.
Yeah.
Because I've coached high school teams. The girls, and you know how this is, when you're in season, you tend to hang out with the people from your sport.
Naturally,
right. And that's how the girls are. I mean, they tend to hang out with the people from the wrestling team. They essentially come together as if they are just from one high school and treat it like they are a high school team, which is really cool to see. And that I didn't know. I didn't know what that would look like. Our motto since day one has been "Together We Rise," which obviously makes sense when you're 4 schools coming together to try to do something great. But the togetherness really, it kicked off year 1, and then year 2 it got better, and now year 3 it's even better. So it's been a neat experience for them.
Yeah. Was there a possibility that like it was just going to be a big experiment and wasn't going to work out? Like, was there a percentage or like a possibility that it didn't happen? Because you're talking about, make sure we get all these people and make sure they have a great experience. But like, was there ever, I'm not necessarily like in a necessarily like a bad way, but like a possibility that all of it didn't work out and you had to try it in another 10 years when there's more people?
Right. Not in my mind. There never was. I think we surprised a lot of people. When year 1 we had 28 girls out. Yeah. I don't think there was an expectation of that. Yeah. I wasn't surprised by it. We were like the 33rd state, I think, to sanction wrestling. We were not one of the first ones. Now, we have one of the largest populations of girls in high school wrestling right now. Like overnight, it just blew up. And I expected that. And the reason for that, we live in a wrestling state. There's a lot of people whose parents, their dad wrestled. I have girls on our team I have girls on our team that one's uncle and one's father wrestled for the University of Iowa. So, there's a lot of connections. So I knew those girls were out there. We just had to give them a home. And once we did that, they brought their friends in with them. Yeah. Not all of them stayed.
Which is unfortunate, but
yeah. But I mean, it is what it is. Not but they brought their friends in the doors with them, and quite a few of them did stay. So,
was there any compromises that you had to make within the first few years that you didn't, like, if you're at like a regular program, for example, like Waukee, that's already been like established, that you like, let's say, like, I don't know if there is an example, but is there any compromise you had to make, considering you're starting a brand new team with people who've never started anything before?
I think administratively there were compromises that we made because we didn't know what the numbers were going to be. So year one, I think we might have had 2 coaches, that were on the paid staff? No, 3. We had 3. We had a middle school coach and then me and an assistant coach. That's about doubled because of growth. Yeah, so, and we were struggling. I mean, I remember the first time I took a team to Donnybrook, and Joe Birch couldn't be there until afternoon because he was graduating from college, and he had to drive up from. He was getting his master's degree, so he had to drive up from the graduation ceremony, so he was going to be late, and it was just me, and I had 14 girls wrestling, and I was running around, trying to cover all the mats, and I couldn't. I had girls wrestling without, and actually Volmicki helped me out because he had a few more coaches there for the same number of kids. And he had a few more coaches, so he started coaching some of our girls until Joe got there and it settled down. Now that wouldn't happen because
of course,
we've made the adjustments based upon what the current participation numbers are.
Yeah.
So stuff like that. Yeah. The other kind of big thing was we have a CIML dual schedule, but year one we didn't know what that was going to look like either. And so we worked. I should say the ADs worked together, and then got some input from us and put together a pretty good program that, year one it looked a certain way. It got better year two in terms of the dual schedule, and then we implemented that again this year. So there were some challenges, and I think some of the schools still have some challenges with regards to the recruitment process, but I feel like we're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah. When it comes to like a schedule, like initially, because you guys are like a brand new program, did you have to like travel super far? Because instead of having like a team at every single one of these places and then having them like cross compete, you just have one team. Like, was it difficult finding people initially? Because I mean, as you said, it's doubled in growth and stuff like that.
Right.
So like probably more teams has popped up and stuff like that.
The Iowa Wrestling Coaches and Officials Association was a huge asset year one. As soon as sanctioning happened, they created I don't want to say a listserv, but like a Google Doc where teams could go on there and say, hey, we're going to host a tournament, what date it was, how many teams you wanted, what your proposed format was going to look like. And that document's still in existence, although now, year three, most of us have settled into this is what my season looks like. And now we'll make some micro management to it, but for the most part, teams are kind of set in what their schedule is going to look like. But year one, I think probably everybody was going into that document and looking, and
trying to figure everything out.
Where to go. And the majority of our tournaments, I mean, I think our this past weekend we sent one team to Colfax Mingo and we sent the other to Atlantic, and that's about as far as we go unintentionally, meaning that there's not another local tournament in the area for that weekend. Those are the best options. But we do intentionally travel. We've gone outside the state. We take a team to the Clash National Duels, which we've won twice. That's in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And then we take a team to the Donnybrook, which we won this year. That's like a 45-team tournament, regional team tournament, and it's a 2-day tournament. And so we do that one, and then we also do a 2-day tournament at Council Bluffs. We got second in that one. I think it's a 35-team tournament. We got beat by Washburn Rural out of Topeka, Kansas. But those are intentional. Where we're going 2 hours.
Yeah, making plans and stuff
yes, like and making plans, and that's part again. Waukee and then Waukee Northwest goes to both the same 2 tournaments.
Yeah.
So my goal was to give the girls the same experience that the boys have.
Has there ever, like in the current situation now, has there been like different things that you've been able to give experience to the team that like you didn't give to the boys, where it's something like I don't know. There doesn't have to be an answer to
Yeah.
the question, but like, has there been something that's been more special because like it was this team or something like that?
Sure. Well, this team in particular, I mean, I've got a special team right now. There's the way they click, the way they listen, what the collective goals of the team are, is really neat, and something that every coach hopes for every year. Doesn't mean you get it every year.
Oh, for sure, I know.
So that's something that's pretty impressive about this particular team is they're a good group. They've really come together with the mindset that every day we're working to get our partner better. And if you're working to get your partner better, you're getting better too.
Yeah.
And that just elevates the team. It's really easy when you're a brand new program to say, hey, whatever you do, girls, leave this better than what you found it. And so I think that's another thing is that the girls are looking to really elevate the program. So those kind of things, I guess I would say are exciting and fresh. And with the boys programs, we encourage those types of things, but because it wasn't so fresh, it wasn't always like that.
Yeah.
And so that part I'm excited about. The other thing that's neat about coaching on the girls' side with a brand new sport is I get so many blank canvases.
Oh, for sure.
In other words,
imagine.
8th graders and 9th graders, I'm not fixing bad habits that they developed as a youth for 3 years, and then now I got to say, hey, that's not going to work now, and that kind of thing. And so it's really refreshing to be able to kind of have my image of what a Waukee wrestler is going to look like, or what a Raccoon River wrestler is going to look like, and then create that image on a blank canvas, and that's a lot of fun too.
Kind of going into I guess that blank canvas, and I'm guessing I guess your whole team eventually was a blank canvas. That probably at some point. How do you just generally approach looking at a person or a wrestler who hasn't done anything before, maybe has a year or two experience, to try to bring them to the high school level? Like, what do you try to sculpt them to the wrestler and the values and the people that you want to try to make come out of this program?
Sure. So there to me there's 3 pillars to wrestling. I think some would probably say there's more, but to me there's 3 pillars. There's the mental aspect of it. There's the physical or the athletic aspect of it, and then there's the technical aspect of it. One of the things that we do uniquely in our room is, from a technical aspect, the wrestling is a sport where the neutral position is really important. Getting takedowns is a real important part of the sport, and there's different tactics and techniques to getting takedowns. Some are more engaged in shooting, some are more engaged in short offense or throwing type of thing. And so one of the things that we do that might be different than what a lot of schools do is I actually divide the room up based upon where I think a particular wrestler, based upon just watching them the first few weeks of practice, or and then as I get to know them better throughout their career, what they're going to be more inclined to do. And then we try to work them within. So
it's like stylistically versus like this is like the varsity side versus the JV side.
Right.
Okay.
It's stylistic.
Nice.
And I practice the middle school together with the high school, so that some of those stylistic ideas are being implemented as early as when they're in 8th grade.
Do you have to make a decision then, or like how easy is it to like switch between the two?
Real easy, because
like fundamentals are the same.
Yeah, a lot of the fundamentals are the same. Positionally, it's the same, but what you're doing or what you're trying to work for changes. And sometimes, yes, I do move some people from the shooting group to the short offense group, and sometimes vice versa. And sometimes, you have to learn, like you said, fundamentally, you have to learn both aspects of it. It's just where are you putting your focus? And so sometimes we do work together, and then a lot of the positions, like, for example, defending shots and things like that, we work together. So it's not every day that we split into the 2 groups, but generally speaking, when we're working on offensive attacking positions from the neutral position, we'll split up. A little bit on bottom too, because people tend to wrestle differently on bottom. We have our people that do traditional stand-ups and traditional sit-backs, and then people that are more inclined to do quad pod. So we actually divide up based on that. And I have the coaching staff for it, which really helps.
Yeah, I was going to say it probably helps a ton.
It does. And I have coaches that know those particular positions. So we are able to take our coaching staff and assign them based upon the strengths of the coaching staff as well.
So like through a pre-interview with one of the girls on the team, one of the wrestlers, she talked a lot about how technical you were and how like on a technical. I mean, obviously you were D1 for a year or before you decided.
Nah, but that's not where I got my technique from.
Right, but like to some level, you have this very much high level understanding. Like in order to like go to that kind of level, you need to have a high level understanding. You probably have a lot more now. How much would you say like technique? Like you had the 3 pillars, whatever. How much would you say like technique matters, and like how much emphasis would you say you personally put on it?
Sure. That's a hard question to answer because it's individual. So for some of wrestlers in general, not just girls on my team, but for some wrestlers in general, I think the mental component is the thing where they are either really super strong or lacking, and you actually have to train that. You have to train yourself to have positive affirmation and to overcome negative thinking. So for some people, they may be really athletic, but down on themselves, and so we have to really work on that aspect for that particular individual. Overall, I mean, I would say we are a very technical room. We teach a limited amount of technique and try to get fundamentally sound in the principles of those of the technique. I think the techniques that we're teaching are things I would say really that I developed more from 2008 until the present as a coach, because I think you learn more about technique when you're coaching it than when you're doing it or watching it, right? And so I feel like what's really shaped me as a coach is my experience, working with Chad Volmeke, working with Marty Sullivan, working with Al Garrison, working with club coaches like Pablo Bassa. I mean, I've had a lot of really impactful mentors over the years, and if not even Chaz Finero at Van Meter being another one.
All these guys have great names. I just have to say that some of these dudes have incredible names.
That some of them weren't even mentors. We were even, but we would like work through positions and try to decide, hey, what do we do here? What's a good stuff to do here? So I mean, we're a very technical program, but that's not the only reason we're successful.
Yeah. If this doesn't land, I'll have to give a different analogy. But like, would you say you want your athletes to be more like a La Liga in a sense of like the more technical versus like an English Premier League where it's a lot more like a physical and a lot more like brute force?
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good analogy. Yeah. I'd like some of our wrestlers to be La Liga, and I'd like some of our wrestlers to be the English Premier League, and basically. A lot of that has to do with style. And if you lock yourself into only one style in the sport of wrestling, you're going to have half a good team, because not everybody is going to come to the table with the same style. And so I try very hard to embrace those, not everybody does stuff. We have girls on our team that don't do stuff perfectly, and or like with that technical ability that you would hope that they would have, but they're really successful even with the nuances that they've thrown into it. And sometimes you find out their nuances make it work better. Especially for them. So I've always been, there are some things that are just wrong. And I will be like, that's just wrong. You cannot do that, right? Yeah. But for a lot of people, I let them explore the nuances of as long as they understand the fundamentals of what we're trying to get them to do, I let them explore the nuances of what they're doing. And I feel like that is one of the reasons that we're really successful as a program.
Yeah. Kind of going into, like, diving into this a little bit more. I unfortunately can't talk to the technique too much.
Right.
Like, I wrestled for maybe like a month and a half before I was done. I was like, I can't do this anymore. It's too hard. But when it comes to like teaching people like the skill level, obviously, like, especially in a wrestling room, it's completely different than unless we're, for example, like soccer, where like maybe you have someone who's a way higher skill level, but they're still able to like learn and teach everyone off of that. But like compared to this is like wrestling in general, not just specifically with the girls, but like how do you help them with the like the levels of skill, and like how do you help them like make sure that they're getting to the technical level, because it's wrestling is very, very technical. Obviously, like strength comes into a little bit and like your conditioning and stuff like that, but like technical wise.
So I think a good example of that would be let's take Katie, who's my daughter, and who's
pretty insane, isn't it?
She's a pretty good wrestler, right? She's ranked number 12 in the country, number 1 in the state, has 1 loss in high school. Really good wrestler. Who does she work with? Well, she works with Cassie McAllister, Quincy Cooper, both of who are at this point. Let's see, Quincy's a third-year wrestler and Cassidy's a second-year wrestler. Cassidy's ranked 3rd in the state as a second-year wrestler.
Like, oh my gosh.
So what has she done for them is elevated their level. Quincy has been in and out of the rankings. She's over 30 match winner though. So that I think answers your question. Is I think we have to take our more experienced wrestlers and challenge them to bring the less experienced wrestlers to their level, and I think we do a pretty good job with that. Because we're training 8th through 12 with a whole broad range of technical skill. There are days where intermingling is really beneficial. Both, we just talked about this.
Yeah.
Teaching something makes you better at it, and so we have certainly days where working with somebody that maybe doesn't have the same experience level as you, both can still get something out of it.
Yeah.
And then there are some days where the less experienced girls are working together, and we're maybe getting ready for something where the more experienced girls are working together.
Yeah.
Recognizing, though, when I say the more experienced girls, I'm talking about Katie and a Cassidy and a Quincy, when 2 years ago
they had no idea about the sport. Yeah.
Right. So, that's one of those great things about, again, at least on our team, the invest in your partner is an investment in you.
Yeah. Can we just talk about Katie and Quincy for a second? Because like they're both sophomores and juniors, and you said they've wrestled for like 2 and 3 years.
So Katie's been wrestling much longer than that.
Okay.
Katie and so here's what it looked like if you went back in the time capsule to 2022.
Because like in a span of a year, being able to jump from never wrestling before to like ranked number 1, ranked number 3, and stuff like that.
Yeah. So Katie started wrestling probably around 3rd grade. So she wrestled boys back in youth when that was like there was some girls tournaments, and she liked to go to girls tournaments, but for the most part you had to wrestle in boys tournaments against boys, and so that's the world that she grew up in. And Callista Rodish is the same, and obviously they're from a rankings and a performance standpoint, they're 2 of our best wrestlers. That said, Naomi Templeman is a senior this year. She started as a sophomore. She's ranked number 4 in the state, and she's got the second most wins on the team right now. We certainly in 2022 had a large swath of new people come into the sport, plus Katie, Callista, and then I had about 2 other girls, maybe 3 at that time, that had some experience from middle school, not long-time youth wrestling experience. And so that's what it's built up from. But recognizing the advancement in the sport, we have put together a youth program. It currently has, I think it's about 80 girls registered for it.
Wow, that's huge.
And that's a K through 7 program, because obviously in 8th grade.
Is that just Northwest, or is it kind of like the Raccoon River?
No, that's Raccoon River.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's open to all of the so the boys programs used to, you're a boy, you're a girl, you just came in and worked out. Now the boys youth programs kind of point them in our direction if there's girls inquiring about wrestling. Plus we advertise for it.
Yeah, of course.
So we have 2 nights a week that 3rd through 7th meet, and then 1 night a week that K through 2 meets. And that's kind of me forecasting that we're going to have to continue to have developed wrestlers come into the scene as other schools are doing that, as other girls are starting to see high school and then going and joining clubs and those types of things. So that's where I see the sport going, but that certainly isn't where it is yet.
Yeah.
And I would say probably the biggest class I think that we have in that youth programming is the 6th grade class. And actually it's mostly ADM girls. And I think that's probably going to be a really good time for ADM to consider peeling off the program.
So come to that,
which will just coincidentally be around the same time that they're going to build their new school, which will give them a whole nother wrestling room. So we're kind of projecting those types of numbers so that we can help the satellite schools figure out what their future looks like with girls wrestling. But also, from our perspective, developing the same way that VSA feeds into Northwest Milwaukee. Some sort of league program that we have girls that have been exposed to the sport before 8th grade. Our biggest class is in 6th grade. For the next 3 years, I'm going to still be beating on classroom doors and saying, hey, look, you look like a wrestler. You need to come out here. And trying to get a lot of word of mouth and trying to get girls out of the high school.
Kind of talking to, just when the school happens, obviously that's what eventually would want to happen, is have 4 different schools. How far away are we from having just be, have all 4
completely split off?
Yeah.
That's a great question. And I don't know that I can tell you in my mind ADM will be the first ones to split off, and that's 2-prong. One, there's this group of girls that's coming up. And 2, they're going to have the facilities. So if you ask why is ADM part of this? Why is Van Meter part of this? Both schools were challenged in that in Van Meter's situation they have 1 wrestling room, and that serves the boys programs, the boys middle school program, and so it's full. And then you try to throw some youth programming in there, and it's really, really full.
Not to mention you'd have to double that for the girls, essentially.
Correct. And it's a very small room. So from facilities management, they already had challenges. And then when you look at it's a smaller school. There's about 70 kids per class. And so, just from a numbers, you're not going to have the population. I think we have 5 wrestlers that come over from Van Meter, which I'm pretty happy with. And then ADM was in the same boat. They have 2 wrestling rooms, but they're in use by their boys programs and then their youth programming. And so a lot of it, the sanctioning kind of got hit over the head to the school districts, because the Girls Association went from, we're kind of thinking about this, to 1 year later saying, yeah, we're going to do it, and we're putting it in place for the next year. And so it left different school districts with the challenge of trying to figure out how to do it. Different districts did different things. I like what we did, and I think it's proven to be successful. But I think when we fast forward a couple of years from now, when the first schools pull out, it's going to also prove to have been a good way to build those programs up. So, I'm actually excited about, it seems crazy to be excited about that, but I'm excited to see that we didn't just build RRW, but that we actually did what my initial goal was, which was to improve girls wrestling for the 3 school districts that we serve.
Do you think that we're alluding to it, but we're talking about how an ADM will be the first to leave because of the space. With Northwest and Waukee, will those 2 ever go away? Because both.
Well, I think they will.
I think have a space. Waukee had the biggest wrestling room before, besides the 2 colleges before Northwest was built, probably, I think. But
We certainly have the space, and I think we will. I think the litmus test from that is we're nowhere near, which is can we field dual teams? Can we go to dual tournaments as individual schools? And the answer to that right now is a resounding no. We would have both teams about a third to maybe even half in Waukees situation open weights. And so what does that mean? That means that you don't want to do dual tournaments, or when you go to a dual, or if you go to like a CIML dual, it's not fun, and then less girls want to participate.
You're not competing.
Right, and because you're not competing, exactly. So I do see that in the horizon, and that's why I say that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Because I don't know when that happens, and part of that is, it could happen in 2 years. Like all of a sudden, we're right now the numbers are coming in about even. We have in our middle school program, I think we have 12 girls, and it's about 6 and 6. I think those numbers need to probably double for it to become self-sufficient. Plus, have enough girls in that youth program. 70 sounds like a lot, but when you divide 70 between kindergarten and 7th grade, and then also you backload it, there's more, kindergarten through 2nd graders than there are the older girls.
Yeah.
Because most of those older girls already have their sports.
Yeah.
They're already playing soccer. They're already playing, volleyball. They're already playing basketball or tennis or softball or whatever. They're already engaged in a sport. So it's those younger girls that are going to get so engaged in wrestling that will keep them where this is their primary sport and not just something that they're piddling in.
Yeah. I have a question generally about I don't even really say I have a question because we're kind of interviewing you, but when it comes to like skill wise, before in some sense it's fun. So like this, I play lacrosse after soccer, not anymore, but anyways. So like in order for that to get to like a skill level where like it's not like almost just dreading to be on the field because like, oh no, I can't pass and catch. Like it takes a long time. Like how long would you say? And I feel like soccer would be shorter than that. Obviously, you got to learn how to balance with your feet. And I feel like basketball probably a lot faster because like it's not, you learn how to balance your whole body while moving a ball. How would you say like wrestling is before like you get to a point where like, okay, maybe you're competing. Obviously, maybe you're not winning. But got to a point where like it's fun and you're not just getting beaten down on.
Cassidy McAllister's space, a year.
A year?
Within a year, she's one of the top girls in the state. And let me follow that up with she beat the number 12 girl in the country at the Clash. Amazing performance by her. It was the girl that won Fargo Freestyle Nationals. So that was a year.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Is that normal? No, that's not normal. It helps again to have a great practice room. And our lightweight room is extremely good. Katie could be the core around it, but we have Phoebe Tim, I have Van Beek. We have a number of girls, all that are I think varsity level wrestlers that are competing with each other. When we have practices set up for competing or training with each other is when we have practices set up for drilling. So that's kind of a long answer to that question. It can happen real rapid. I've seen kids come out on the boys' side. Like
what's it like?
A
like a month or two.
Brandon Tessau. Brandon Tessau came out as an 8th grader, and by the time he was a senior, he was a state finalist, and he wrestled at Iowa State, and now he's a coach at Waukee. So there's an example of somebody that came out in 8th grade and was able over 4 years to get himself to state finalist level. The other thing to keep in mind about wrestling, like let's say you come out for the first time as an 8th grader, which all but one of our 8th graders this year. That's them. We have one 8th grader that's been wrestling for a few years in youth, and the rest of them are brand new to the sport. And so when you go to the middle school meet, we're going to rank you 1, which would be our girl that's been wrestling for years, to 3. And then we can also put plus and minuses in there. We can say somebody is like really athletic but brand new. 3+ or maybe even a 2- or something. And so then when the people that are hosting the meet put together the matches,
they can look at it generally.
You generally try to put together people that have the same level of experience. Hopefully coaches have some integrity and put the right numbers down. But really you do, because that's what you want. You want to challenge your wrestlers to get better. And so that's been, I think, we do that with JV too. I mean, our junior varsity, now sometimes we send them out to varsity meets, but sometimes we send them out to true JV scrambles where they're doing the pairings just like they do in middle school. So that's one of the things that makes the sport a little bit unique. Coaches can say, hey, I want this matchup. Now, not in the varsity world, obviously.
Well, yeah, obviously not in the varsity world. It's
right.
completely different.
But in the developmental world, you can do really neat things that help give confidence to newer athletes or less athletic athletes or not yet fully developed athletes. So,
So this is a piece of, the question is if you could go back in time and give yourself starting this program one piece of advice, what would you give?
Well, from the program level, I don't think I would change a lot. I really like I had a vision from day one. In fact, I don't think that my vision from day one was going to be that year 2 we were going to play second in state or go out and beat the number 8 team in the country at the Clash. I didn't see. That wasn't my vision. But my vision was that if we stuck with real sound technical fundamentals and taught them in a way that the blank canvases out there could learn them quickly. And also tried to meet people where they were in terms of their own style that they wanted to develop or that their body was naturally inclined to, that we could get pretty good pretty quickly. And there's none of that I would change. It's the one thing I wish that we had earlier, the coaching staff that we have now, we didn't have that year 1.
Yeah.
So we had to grow into that. And if I had known how big and how quickly the team would grow, we basically had about 40 girls out this year. That's about what we had last year. Not all, you end up with injuries and stuff like that. But,
of course.
If I had known that I would have a room and then you throw in the 12 middle school girls, you get a room with 50 girls in it, I would have probably pushed for more coaching on the front end, but I think we're where we need to be now.
Yeah. As coming from a person who's has experience with different sports, what would you say having, because a lot of people specialize in one thing, but what difference would you say you having a background in soccer or a background in other sports, or do you ever look to other coaches or ask them questions in general about how you can take lessons from that and then apply it to wrestling?
Sure. Or the other way around.
Yeah, or the other way around.
Which is probably my better selling point. Realistically, wrestling is not a first sport for about half of my team. I've got a number of girls that are involved in other sports, and including girls that are doing very well at the state level on my current team. I have girls that play soccer. I have girls that run track. I have girls that play softball. Yesterday I get the, hey, coach, I have to leave at 6 o'clock to go to softball practice or something. And I let them do that because I recognize where we're at in their life or where we're meeting them, so to speak. I think that'll change a little bit. But I do think it is wholesome for athletes to have other outlets. I think wrestling is great because it does work on the wrestling mindset, and I think the wrestling mindset is easily transferable to other sports.
Well, for sure.
I think the balance, the hand-eye coordination, just think you have to think quickly, and because it's a continuous motion sport. So I think that all translates very well to other sports. So I think it's great. I think too many boys don't look at the advantage that going through a wrestling season, even if they're not the greatest wrestler out
Yeah.
there, but just going through the season and working on personal development, how that would impact them in whatever their first sport is, whether it's football, baseball, soccer.
Yeah.
So that I'm a big fan of. I also understand, from as a parent, as a coach, there are those athletes that they figure out kind of early, this is what I want to do, and I like it, and I'm all in.
Yeah, double down.
Yeah, I want to double down on it. And some of those athletes burn out and don't end up where their parents, their coaches think they're going to end up, and some of them do. And there's a lot of paths to success in the world of sports.
Oh, for sure.
I don't think there is any right path, wrong path, or best path. I think that student athletes need to listen to themselves and what they feel. The one thing that I would always caution them about is wherever you find yourself in that space, you have to find motivation. Because it's real easy to say, well, my path is the one of least resistance, and I don't want to do this, and I don't want to do that. And that's dangerous. But the flip side of that is listen to your body. If you want to take a break for a season and maybe just work on your primary sport one day a week and go have an entire different sport that you're learning, you may find that break is good for you.
Yeah. That happens. Like, I know people who've done that before where it's like, even as of this season, like, I'm doing a project on a swimmer named Cam Sanchez. Like, he literally took a break from swim, and he was like, has a possibility to like do huge things, right? But like takes a break, and it, like, at least from what he said, had a huge impact on how much when he returns to the sport, like how much he loves it more,
right?
And also like just breaks in general, because I feel like, especially now, kids are always playing sports. Like, it's not a knock on it, but like the 3-3 club that we have on the board out here, where it's like 3 different sports for 3 different years. Like, I don't know how some of them do that. Like, you still have to like live your life, and you're practicing for all these different ones. Yes, some of them have translations over and stuff like that, but I mean, it's just a lot, I feel like. So
I'm a big one, though. I will say this, like that athlete that you're talking about is, if you're going to take a break, go find it, and it doesn't have to be another sport.
Oh yeah, he did another sport, but yeah.
Okay, I mean but do another sport is great, or find a different hobby or something, and still dabble in what you're primarily going to do when you get back out of it. And I think that those two things in combination, it keeps you from sliding backwards.
Yeah,
and you don't slide backwards nearly as much as you think you do. I mean, people come back from injuries all the time that take them 3 to 6 months, and they're just as good at the sport when they get back from the injury. So, so I think touching something one day a week or something like that is a really good idea, and then finding something different and seeing how that impacts you in what your primary sport is. And again, I think a great way to do that, boys and girls, is wrestling. But track is another one that kids have been using that for years. And I would encourage a lot of kids to maybe look at wrestling in the same way that they look at track, as a great performance enhancer as a sport.
Yeah. Kind of just coming to the close, what can we kind of expect from RRW coming to the future?
Sure. Well, we hope to win state this year. We'll see. We
Hyped.
have some stiff competition, and so a lot of it's going to depend on how many we get out of districts and how many they get out of districts, and then how teams score points at the tournament. But so in the immediate future, that's the immediate goal. Next year, we will lose 3 of our starters to graduation, and I feel quite certain that our class coming up of freshmen already has girls in there that are ready to step into those roles. And I feel our 8th grade class has already got some girls in there that have discovered a new thing that they really like, and that they're going to continue to work towards, and will also step into some of those roles. So I think the future looks really good. There's no reason to believe that we won't be as successful in the coming years as what we're doing right now.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and coming on.
Sure.
It's 10 o'clock on a random Tuesday,
Yeah.
so for taking the time out of your day and coming on the show, it means a ton.
Sure. Thank you.